Ronnie Ann didn't expect to find herself stewing in hidden anger during the day. Granted, she was at school, so the stress was always there, but she felt an odd sense of ventilation that she didn't even think she'd feel before. Jealousy. Being dubbed the Queen of Pain, you wouldn't think Ronalda had something to so feel envious about. She was essentially one of the most popular girls in school. No one would ever dare cross her if it meant dealing with a broken nose, and she just had that imitation as her factor about out her of what would send a warning signals to the potential bullies. And yet she was terrified. She was irritated, not because of what someone did to her, but because of what she was doing was a very close friend of hers. The Hispanic girl has always been silently watching Lincoln throughout the day, looking at how the others were treating him, since it became apparent that everyone in school saw the beatdown that had been delivered. The boys either congratulated him or avoided him, something that Ronalda had felt proud for Lincoln for. It seems that he got his wish. The white-haired boy had practically stepped into her shoes one day, but with the girls, it was a different story. And it was that her anger resided with. It pissed off the tomboy to no end on how all these girls were suddenly paying attention to Lincoln. Now he grew proven that he was no slouch. He knew that just a week ago, he knew some ridicule over the mascot suit that he wore. Now he wouldn't even give him that time of long day just before that. But now they were flirting with him. That act alone just caused Ronaldo to snap out of the two pencils half during her class. Within 90 minutes remaining of the school day, Ronaldo walked briskly through the halls to her locker. With a irate look etched on her face, several students always gave her the little wide berth that she was in a sour mood, which eased her stress a little. Last thing she wanted to do was knock on some loser down and get slapped with detention. The other silver lining at the end of this tunnel was that today her last class was the same one Lincoln had as well. Not sense science, as it was interesting, but at least she'd get him to ask on how his day was going. Shutting her locker with a loud slam, she walked her way to class. Passing by another hallway, she looked to her left and spotted Lincoln digging his books from his locker, his entire head shoved down there. He wasn't paying much attention to his immediate surroundings. Looking closely at the inside of her locker, Ronaldo could see bits and pieces of garbage that was still caked on the inside. Ronnie Ann remembered that day clearly. She was still surprised and managed to drag the whole can of white trash to his locker without getting caught. But it was easy to remember Lincoln's locker's combination after watching him. In secret, stuffing it in there. It was a different matter. The tomboy easily recalled having to wash up thoroughly in the girls' restroom due to some waste spilling onto her. At the end, she managed to clean herself up good enough to be able to witness her prank occur actually planned. If it were at any other time, Ronaldo would have laughed at the memory, but right now, she felt a knot form in her stomach. With the ugly feeling of guilt rearing its head once more, Lincoln may have forgiven her for the past pranks, but she still felt bad for giving him the crap at school when he had enough problems going on at home. She was willing to make a bet that he had plenty of pranking issues thanks to Luann. And as for Lincoln, was finished up changing his books out. Ronaldo took a note of the few girls that he didn't even know, grinning at Lincoln and talking to one another. Her guilt was beaten down by the hostility once more. "Stupid pigs," she muttered. After a bit of talking, one of the girls decided to make their way over to him. Sizing up her silently, Ronaldo could tell that the girl was pretty nervous. The other female was Caucasian, had red curly hair, and wore a navy blue blouse with a skirt to match, and had an orange hair headband on the side. The Queen of Pain squinted her eyes. This girl looked oddly familiar. She recalled to having Lincoln told her about the video contest that he entered, and she saw the video herself. That was her name. The tomboy's eyes widened open upon realizing who it was. Christina was the girl Lincoln used to have a crush on, even fantasizing about kissing her from what the video showed. Naturally, the redhead was creeped out and switched classes. The two rarely saw each other since. Not only that, but for some odd reason, some of the boys felt that she needed to be protected from Lincoln. So to point out even a few threatened aloud for no reason. But Ronnie Ann was confused on this end. Why would Christina, out of all people, talk with Lincoln? Unless she. Ronalda knitted her brows, her left eye twitching, and her grip tightening on her books. Oh, there is no way that Ginger is going to try and ask him out. Not if I have anything to say about it, she muttered to herself. To her, Christina had no right to even speak with him, so he snapped up to beat up 5 boys. And what was he? Their knight in shining armor? Well, to Ronnie Ann, this would be true, especially after last night. But everyone else? When it shows in hell? Maybe. But it was already bad enough that he had to watch these girls' poor attempts to flirt with him. But when someone who's especially requested to get far away from him as possible, who tries to do it, that's when she draws the line. The tomboy needed to show these girls that they were way too late to think about Lincoln as their potential boyfriend. And she knew just how to do that. Seeing Christina pause just a couple short meters from him, Lincoln hadn't noticed her presence yet. She seemed to be having second thoughts, and turned back to look at the girls behind her. Seizing the opportunity, Ronalda Speck walked towards the boy in the opposite direction. One with the spitting stance, she then leaned on one of the close lockers. Hey, Lamo. Lincoln jumped upon hearing her voice. Oh, hey, Ronnie Ann. With this attention now on her, there was a little chance of him noticing Christina. So, how's your day been? How is everything acting? The boy replied. I see. Well, of course, the tomboy asked. Good despite everyone's acting, the boy replied. I see, Ronalda said, trying not to let her anger show. So, what are you doing tonight? Well, besides homework, nothing really. Why? All of us is thinking we can hit the arcade later. My treat. Pick me up at 6? Okay? Okay, technically I'm staying, Lincoln started, before the warning bell cut him off. Well, there's the bell. Come on, let's go get some science stuff to do, partner. Ronnie Ann smirked, before taking Lincoln's hand and walking him to their next class. Turning their heads slightly, she saw the disappointed look Christina had. The other girls, who were probably the redhead's friends, were glaring at the Queen of Pain. Ronalda gave him the smug grin as the duo wandered off. Who were you looking at? Lincoln asked. Turning her full attention back to Lincoln, the Hispanic girl gave a genuine smile. No one besides you. Dr. Feinstein's dentistry wasn't always busy during the weekdays. Practically in the middle of the day. In most cases, appointments came in the late afternoon or early evening hours, when the kids and parents aren't busy with school or work. On most days, Rita expected to only work with kids doing regular checkups, cavities, since the kids don't floss like they should, or the occasional caramel apple incidents. But what she didn't expect today was having to work with a child whose teeth had fallen out due to a serious blunt trauma. The Maharaj then recognized the boy almost immediately from the video, the same one who pulled her daughter's overalls and flung her into it like a slingshot. It wasn't for the fact that Chandler was already in pain. Rita would have given the god to slap the boy for touching her daughter. She wouldn't have cared if the boy's mother chewed her out for it either. However, considering that she had to help Dr. Feinstein, it was almost every patient. Rita, begrudgingly, helped the doctor assess the damage done to the boy's mouth. You'd think you'd have this done at the hospital, but as far as teeth alignments are considered, the practice as a dentist is preferred option. Chandler only had to open enough where Frankenstein could clearly see the inside, but the small fracture on the jawline prevented the redhead from opening his mouth completely. Well, it's not bad, but it's not great either. 2 baby teeth have been removed, which aren't the issue, but your left incisor, right canine, and both premolars and your second left premolar are removed. And according to your life, those were your adult teeth from your file. Am I going to be able to speak clearly at all? Chandler asked with his mouth was open. Well, of course, but your teeth will end up misaligned as they continue to grow in, causing some issues. To fix this, you'll be needing fake teeth and braces to correct this alignment. Honestly, I'm surprised an 11-year-old could do this sort of damage, the doctor stated. At this point, I'm not surprised, Rita voiced, making no effect to the side of her irritation. I know you're upset, Rita, but please try not to quell your anger. Sorry, David, but you know how moms get with kids. Right. I'm still surprised that your son actually had that much anger in him. Seems like nice, imaginative boy. Is he all right? Rita didn't know how to answer that, since she hadn't seen Lincoln in days, but judging from Lana's testimony, he's doing fine so far, was all she could say. Oh, okay, how about you take a little break? I need to break the news to Chandler's parents. Thanks, Rita said, her tone a bit sullen. Passing by a trash can, she removed the facial masks and gloves before tossing them. She brought a hand to the forehead in frustration and gave a heavy sigh. It wasn't the fact that her hands was in the mouth of the kids who's been beaten by her son, although Rita would be lying to herself if she didn't have fought yanking a few teeth out. Life was not being kind to Miss Loud, and she was well aware that she deserved it. The van broke down again, which meant Lana would have to spend time repairing it. Another thing was on her mind was that the few friends that she had knew congratulated her for being a good mother, as they'd seen the video as well. Ironically, this was the opposite of how Rita felt. There were times when herself and Lynn Sr. could have been spent more paying attention about what her kids had been doing, as much as the Loud children sold about everything in the house during a garage sale. But it was in the one time they managed to pay attention to things before they got out of hand. They picked the stupidest choice. The closest Lincoln had ever been to them was yesterday. Several meters from the house, she wanted to see her son again and tell him how sorry she was and that she would never abandon him again. But at the same time, she was also dreading as much as a meeting. Knowing how children are at this age, or something that is sensitive, Lincoln could be harboring some deep-seated hate for his parents. Even if he was beginning to come around when his sisters, the mother was also worried about Lynn Jr., considering that she fought Lincoln tooth and nail before he ran off. Getting those two to forgive each other would probably be the hardest task. Not only that, she noticed her daughter's behavior had been disorientating. At first, Lynn seemed to be a bit depressed for the first few days, but now it seemed to be copying Lucy, or worse. The mother also began to wonder if Lynn was eating anything. The last time she picked her up was due to having a crying episode. She felt lighter than usual. Lynn said she was fine, but mother's tuition told her otherwise. She definitely needed to talk with her when she got home. Feeling slightly hungry, the Monarch decided to step out of the office. As Rita walked out of the waiting room, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were waiting patiently for their son to finish. The father seemed rather irritated about something, and given the scowl on his face, while the mother was just focused on the well-being of her son. Both parents had a bit of an argument, whatever to press charges for Chandler being assaulted. The father was obviously for it, and the mother was against it. Regardless of the argument, the father went to call the police. Unfortunately for him, the officer on the line refused to process their complaint, since it was obvious their boy deserved it, as well as another reason came in before of a threat. It's still assault and battery regardless, whatever it was warranted, the man muttered. Don't start this again, Brandon. I told you they wouldn't hear anything about it. As much as I don't like it, you know Chandler deserved what happened to him. If anything, we're the ones who are lucky that the family of that boy didn't press charges. So you're lucky that the officer only left the threat of arresting you for letting your kids play in the sewage plant. If you had tried to process that claim any further, I'm surprised your boss didn't fire you for that, the mother stated in irritation. Let's just say there was a lot of ass kissing and was involved, Brandon grumbled. And salary cut. I know it was Chandler's birthday, but we could have at least held this party somewhere else. Merit, I told you before, I wanted it to be special. And plus it was perfectly safe. The kids even had protective suits. Kids shouldn't be wearing hazmat suits to a birthday party. And what was wrong with my choice to go to Gus's arcade? Their place was pretty outrageous, Brandon shrugged. In response, the Monarch then pinched the bridge of her nose. No, they weren't. They were pretty fair, and it was only supposed to be $50 an hour. The door then opened as David led Chandler out the door. Okay, son, just wait here for a moment. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, a word please. Both parents followed the head dentist as Chandler sat down. He had painkillers in his mouth, but it felt still a bit sore, likely from having to keep it open for several minutes. The redhead was thankful that he didn't have school today. He already got chewed up big time from his mother for letting him get over his head, and should have known better. His father was a bit more lenient, but it paled in comparison of the amount of hateful stress he had gotten when he returned from school. Feeling his mouth, Chandler brought it back to that incident at the park. It was probably the talk of the town or now or something. One of them side knew he screwed up, and he and his friends tossed it like a girl, like a toy to the pond. He always viewed Lincoln to be his weak little boy. It failed to grow a spine, and the constant teasing and he dealt provided what Lincoln didn't do much to him. That is until he's messed with someone that is apparently was his sister. Lesson learned, don't pick on another person's sibling right in front of them. Man, you look like crap, spoke in a childish male voice. Looking across from him, Chandler was shocked to see the blonde-haired boy just a feet away. Not exactly a good reason to be surprised, but it was just the way the boy looked. He then wore an orange polo with blue jeans and blue sneakers, and it had a prominent buck teeth, a large nose, and a lack of baby fat on his cheek. The other boy grew confused by the look Chandler was giving him. What? You look a lot like someone I know. If you mean Pineapple Boy, I guess you could say that. I don't see the resemblance though. The boy then started, looking up into a ceiling mirror. So what's your real name? The blonde folded his arm. Connor Pendry. I don't think I ever asked who you are. Chandler? Then Connor have to say in a mocking tone, making the redhead irate. Why did someone have to record all that? I don't know. Maybe it was because it was funny getting your butt whooped by that kid you were torturing. I saw pretty much karma at that play. I thought Pineapple Boy was pretty weak. How exactly do you know him? Connor then shifted in his seat a little. He got me banned from the store once. Over what? Cereal? Chandler asked as a matter of fact. Whatever. Chandler stared at this kid and thought. He irritated him quite easily, and probably does the same thing with everyone else around him. A part of him was coming into conflict with itself, and he wanted to get back at Lincoln for causing him public embarrassment, no doubt ruining his social standing, but the more rational side of him knew was not to cause any more trouble. Last time he received a worse beating from Lincoln, his face was already bad enough. His eyes was almost done healing, but the last thing he wanted was a broken limb. The redhead could also give it some props for Clyde. He didn't think that nerd actually had a pair either. Even so, Chandler's mind thought it was so ridicule and harassment he'd get at school. No doubt his friends were getting theirs, but now he'd be going to the school laughingstock. All the while, Lincoln was probably yucking it up, soaking his new popularity like a sponge. It was funny of how the roles change. Hardly anyone knew Lincoln, and even if they did, it was usually a demean to him, until yesterday. The more Chandler thought about it, the more vengeful side was creeping up. Looking over at the bratty kid across from him, he was right to note that Connor did look similar to Lincoln. Almost too similar. He had a painted on his hair white just so he's a spitting image of him. And at that moment the gears in the ginger's head were turning. Lincoln didn't have to say he didn't care with what Chandler did to him. So as long as he stayed away from his friends and sisters. Not only that, he could get an anonymous act to do is point fingers at the instigator. Hey Connor, are you into pranking? Kinda. I mean, I've done my 2 older sisters, although my second oldest didn't seem fazed by it since she was Nemo. Carol, on the other hand, I just love her reactions. Connor said before giving that off, of what could be described as an annoying laugh. Well, how about rather something complex? Like what? The redhead gave a smug grin. I want to play a little trick on Lincoln. Connor then blinked an eye for a moment before he laughed harder. Okay, back up for a second. You already beat your face in once. Or are you going to gluten for a punishment? Can't punish if you remain anonymous. Okay, so where are you going with this? Okay, since you look like a beaver face, I've got a few ideas in mind. Hold on, I would be up for pranking Lincoln, only if it doesn't come to bite me in the butt. So, what's in for me if I help you? Connor replied, squinting his eyes suspiciously. Half my allowance. How much? I can give you about $350. Connor wrapped his fingers on the armrest. In all honesty, he shouldn't be helping a kid who tossed 6-year-olds in the fit of rage, but if he was going to pay him that much, he would do it a lot. That kind of money, such as getting a couple of games he'd been eyeing as his limited budget, wouldn't allow him to purchase. Looking at the floor nervously, he gave a heavy sigh. Fine, so when are we doing this? Chandler then grabbed a magazine off the table, ripped up a small piece in half, then grabbed a pen from the front desk, wrote something before handing it to Chandler. This is my number. I'll call you when the time comes, which it will be a while since I'm in a deep grounding at the moment. Right, Connor stated, eyeballing the cell number written on the note. The door to the hallway opened, and a 13-year-old girl with blonde hair similar to Connor stepped in. Her eyes were barely visible as they were mostly covered by her bangs. Wearing a purple shirt with a white scarf wrapped along the waist along with the black pants and white shoes. The girls also had a black beanie on her head. Come on, Connor. Carol's here, the teen said with a monotonous tone. Would it kill you to smile every once in a while, Cassie? Yes, it would. Connor rolled his eyes before following his sister out the door. He pocketed the note, making a small mental message in his mind to put it in some place that he remembered it. Soon as school had let out, this time around Lincoln found himself not being talked to by other girls, which is considering to be a blessing for him. He had grown rather uncomfortable. Clyde, on the other hand, was relishing the attention. However, his crush with Lori always prevailed as he turned down some good opportunities to hang out with another girl his age. Lincoln would have had a serious talk with him about that later, hoping that his friend's attention was in this time. In truth, Lincoln had talked with Clyde about this before, but the facts usually fell on deaf ears. Right now he needed to speak with Ronnie Ann, who had been holding his hand since they left school. So, mind telling me why you asked me to pick you up? When are we staying at the same house? Lincoln asked, as this had not been on his mind for 2 hours. Not everyone knows that, Renolda said, shuffling her backpack on her shoulder. True, but it didn't explain the way you were looking at the other girls when they looked in our direction, the boy said uneasily. Just about any female, just as so his glance at Lincoln, were met with a glare from the tomboy, including the teacher at one point. I just didn't want them looking at you. The Hispanic girl glared at the ground, blush creeping up on her cheeks. The ashen-haired child wondered why for a moment, but a brief flash came to the events as they gave him a quick answer. Ronnie Ann, you weren't being jealous, were you? No, why would you care? Well, for one, you had never held me in my hand in public. Lincoln looked down. And you're still even though school isn't the view anymore. Renolda then looked at her hands before quickly unclasped his. Shoving her hands into her pockets, quickening her pace, Lincoln looked on, feeling like he had said the wrong thing. It wasn't uncommon that he did this around Renolda, although this time she didn't felt the sack him in the arm. He thought of it at times Lori would get jealous when he and Bobby hung out together, and when it finally clicked his head, knocking himself down out of his gaze, he ran after her. Ronnie Ann, wait up! She didn't respond, as she just kept walking. But Lincoln caught up and walked next to her. Renolda, I know you said last night that you had issues expressing yourself, but I think I got you now. You did that stuff because you didn't like the other girls giving me that kind of attention. Renolda stopped walking, giving a small, frustrated sigh. It's not just that. No other girl paid attention to you until you suddenly became Mr. Big Shot. The thought of them around you just making me sick. They even tried acting all girly around you. I bet they hardly even knew you. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I had to show them that you were mine and no one else's. That sounded too mushy, but Lincoln smiled. Actually, I think it's sweet. And if it helps, I wouldn't have hung out with any of those girls. At least you pay attention to me before then. Even then, you had an odd way of showing it. Renolda then looked back at him. You sure? 'Cause I'm pretty sure Christina was about to ask you out if I didn't cut her off. Lincoln then was surprised that he didn't even see the redhead girl all day, only to find out she was practically behind him. Thanks to his old crush actually wanting to hang out with him when she took the steps to avoid him, but Lincoln put up in a state of defectiveness for a moment. However, when he looked at Renolda's face, giving him the answer that lied within its heart. If you want my opinion, I would have turned you down, 'cause I already have a girlfriend. The boy grabbed her hand softly, making the Hispanic girl give a genuine smile. Ronaldo looked around for a brief second before planting a kiss on Lincoln's cheek. You're going to start displaying your affection in public, are you? If I need to. Not that I care if the other girls give me mean looks or threaten me, because I can handle it. So as long as you can handle teasing, Zane, she gave a smug look. Trust me, I think I learned my lesson this time. Lincoln laughed, remembering the hateful glare and that day at the French-Mexican restaurant. I will admit, though, if it wasn't for Lori forcing me to join her, we likely wouldn't be this close. Probably. I thought Bobby was going overboard with breaking up with her, or it could have been the plot to get us together. Bobby knew I did like you, Ronaldo said with a quizzical tone. Maybe. Speaking of dates, were you serious about the whole arcade thing? Yeah, if we finish our work fast enough. Lincoln chuckled slightly. Well, if you're up for it, I am. He was then cut short when he bumped into someone. They were coming across a blind corner when it happened. Lincoln then heard something clatter to the ground, as if it was made of plastic. Along with the feminine voice he swore he recognized. Ronaldo helped him keep his balance as he looked over to see who he bumped into. His face was that of great surprise. On the ground and looking directly at him with equal shock, and his 13-year-old sister Lynn, quickly glancing up and down, Lincoln noticed the crutches as well with the brace athlete had on her foot. Ronaldo then looked at the two with tinged nervousness in her body language. And from what Lincoln said, the two had some really bad blood between each other the last time they met. She wasn't even sure if Lincoln still held those sentiments, since he had forgiven a few of his sisters recently. With Lincoln with a little surprise was beginning to subside, his dark thoughts were popping up again. Of course, on this day had to be too good to be true. Getting all that praise at school was the only run to whoever's sister who managed to make this truth seem like a complete fib. Lincoln promised himself that he'd make Lynn pay if he ever saw her again. He thought she was lucky that his sisters held him back before he could do some real damage. The boy's hands started to form into fists, and he felt those harmful memories returning. He gave small glares forming on his face. However, the white-haired child's rage was blocked by that of confusion. Seeing the brace on her foot, the same place where Lincoln bit her, the boy realized he did more damage to her than he anticipated. Not only that, Lynn looked scared, like a child looking up from her tormentor and waiting for them to make the first move. He could pummel her right then and there, and now he had the chance, but his anger was telling him to. But he didn't feel right since she seemed too invulnerable and frightened. Instead, Lincoln just decided to go off the approach when he and the twins popped up so recently. Lynn? The boy said without a care. Hey, Lincoln, Lynn said uneasily, moving her hand to grab the crutches while keeping an eye on her brother. How has your foot been treating you? Still painful, but I'll manage, the 13-year-old said, standing herself up. How have you been? Good, mostly. Lynn shifted uneasily a lot, not sure how to make the small talk at times like this. Thankfully, she had her easily way to back out of this ordeal. I gotta be somewhere now. See ya, she blurted out before going across the street as fast as she could and continued from there. Ronaldo watched as the sports fanatic faded out of sight. Well, that was awkward. Lincoln gave a heavy sigh. Tell me about it. I didn't think I'd actually run into Lynn so soon. I wasn't exactly ready to face her again. Judging from that look she had, I think she was too never thought I ever seen that famous lunatic Lynn, scared of her own brother. Yeah, Lincoln then put his hand to his forehead. My life just got turned upside down. Ronaldo tucked an arm around his. Well, how about now we hit the arcade now? We could keep your mind off of things. The boy then gave a small shrug. I guess so. With Lynn, she panted as she came to a stop on the street the house was on. She utterly then scared of her wits. She definitely didn't expect to run into her brother so soon, so when she did, the athlete thought she was good as dead, since she was on the ground. Lincoln had the perfect opportunity to utterly demolish her. She'd suffer a fate worse than what that jerk Chandler did. Lynn was sure would have had a limb or two broken, with her face beaten and swelled up with the possibility of a rib fracture. That would be the best case scenario. At worst, she might have been in a coma. Lincoln even looked like he wanted to throttle her, but to Lynn's surprise, Lincoln kept himself calm and held an indifferent tone. The sporty girl could have used this opportunity to tell Lincoln she was sorry and that she greatly regretful labeling him as bad luck, because she couldn't handle a single loss, for falsely telling him that she never wanted a brother. She wanted to hug him and pour that heart out for being such a crappy sister. Instead, the sudden meeting let all the words die in her throat and made her run away before things got hairy. Lynn felt saddened when she turned tail and run. Before she could have, she found the courage to speak to Lincoln properly. And as she knew it, a chance was mean like this wouldn't come up again, and she blew it. The athlete wished she didn't feel like such a damn coward to rise up to the challenge of seeing Lincoln again. The problem was that her neck deep in guilt, the brunette still felt largely responsible for breaking her family apart and driving her brother into rage. Lynn sniffled a bit as she continued to walk home, a few tears rolling down her cheeks. She moved slower than normal, that sprint having to take a lot more out of her than she thought. Part of this was due to the fact that she hadn't been sleeping at night, and because Lynn wasn't taking a proper daily energy consumption. When dinner came around, she barely ate much, just enough to get rid of the grumbling in her stomach, but she didn't eat much at breakfast or lunch either. Lenny, Lucy, and even Luna had begun to notice, but she always told them she was fine. Unfortunately for her, Lynn didn't expect her parents to also be taking notes of her new personality.